Introduction. Sometimes, reality doesn't behave the way it should. Moments that defy logic. Memories that don't match history. Events that seem to rewrite the rules of the world itself. From impossible coincidences to time slips and vanishing places. These are not scenes from a movie, but real accounts that continue to puzzle scientists and witnesses alike. Tonight, we step into the cracks of our own reality and explore the glitches that science can't explain. The Mandela Effect. In 2010, a paranormal researcher named Fiona Broom noticed something unsettling while attending a conference. She recalled quite vividly that Nelson Mandela had died in prison during the 1980s, yet history showed otherwise. Mandela had been released in 1990, became president of South Africa in 1994, and lived until 2013. Broom discovered that she was not alone. Thousands of people shared the same false memory, complete with recollections of televised funerals, political reactions, and even school discussions about his death. This collective misremembering became known as the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect is the name given to large-scale instances of shared false memories, where many unrelated individuals remember the same incorrect detail about the past. It is not the simple act of one person being mistaken. It is a phenomenon where entire groups seem to recall an alternative version of reality. Over the years, it has become one of the most discussed examples of how fragile human memory can be, and, for some, possible evidence that reality itself may not be as fixed as we believe. One of the earliest and most famous examples concerns a beloved children's book series, The Berenstain Bears. Many adults distinctly remember the title being spelled Berenstein, with an E. When shown old books, television episodes, and logos, they are often surprised, even unsettled, to see the name has always been spelled Berenstain. The discovery often brings an eerie sense of dissonance, as if the written world had quietly changed while no one was looking. The same sensation surrounds countless other examples. People remember the Looney Tunes cartoon as Looney Tunes. They recall the Monopoly man wearing a monocle, though he never did. The brand Febreze is remembered with an extra E, as Febreze. In Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, the line "Luke, I am your father" was never spoken. The actual dialogue is, "No, I am your father." Yet millions would confidently swear otherwise. These are not minor details in the minds of those who remember them differently. They are fragments of an entire world that feels slightly out of alignment. From a scientific standpoint, memory is not a recording device. It is a reconstruction, a complex neural process shaped by emotion, expectation, and association. Each time a memory is retrieved, it is subtly rewritten before being stored again. This means that collective misremembering is not only possible but inevitable in large groups. Cognitive scientists link the Mandela effect to confabulation, the brain's tendency to fill in missing information with plausible details. The mind prefers coherence over accuracy, and so small distortions can spread and solidify over time. Social and cultural factors also play a role. When a single false detail gains popularity, often through media repetition or internet discussion, it becomes a shared anchor in the collective memory. People begin to align their recollections to fit the common narrative. Online forums and social networks have amplified this process dramatically, creating echo chambers where misremembered facts are validated by others who recall them the same way. What begins as a small confusion can rapidly become a large-scale illusion of consensus. Still, for many who experience it, the Mandela effect feels far deeper than a simple memory error. It carries the strange emotional texture of displacement, as if something fundamental in their past has shifted. Some report sensations of vertigo, melancholy, or awe. The rational explanation does not fully erase the feeling that the universe itself might have edited a line of history. This is where the phenomenon touches something more existential, the relationship between perception and reality. Philosophically, the Mandela effect invites uncomfortable questions about the nature of truth. If memory, language, and shared belief can rewrite the details of the past, what does it mean for something to be real? Historians, psychologists, and physicists have each approached the question from their own perspectives. In quantum physics, certain interpretations even suggest that observation itself plays a role in determining reality, though this is more metaphorical than causal. Still, the parallels are haunting. The more closely we observe the past, the more it seems to shimmer and rearrange itself under our gaze. The phenomenon also exposes a peculiar vulnerability in human cognition. Collective memory, which underpins culture and identity, depends entirely on fragile biological processes. The brain compresses experiences, reshapes them, and aligns them with context. Even when presented with irrefutable evidence, the emotional certainty of a false memory can remain. For those affected, it is not simply that they were wrong. It is that the world itself appears to have changed. Today, the Mandela Effect has become a symbol of the tension between science and mystery. Neuroscience provides explanations grounded in cognitive bias and reconstructive memory. Yet the scale and emotional intensity of the phenomenon continue to inspire alternative interpretations. Theories of parallel timelines, dimensional overlap, or simulated reality. Each explanation, scientific or speculative, reflects humanity's attempt to understand the unsteady boundary between perception and fact. In the end, whether one sees the Mandela Effect as a psychological quirk or a glitch in reality, its power lies in how deeply it unsettles our trust in memory. It reminds us that the mind is not a mirror but a painter, one that quietly revises its work each time we look again. The stories we tell about the past are not snapshots but living organisms, reshaped by each retelling. When thousands of people remember the same false world, it blurs the line between what was and what is. And in that blur, the mystery of the Mandela Effect continues to live, a quiet rift in the collective fabric of human reality. The Matrix Déjà Vu. In 1999, the film The Matrix introduced a hauntingly simple metaphor: déjà vu as a glitch in the system. In one scene, the protagonist sees a black cat pass by twice in exactly the same way, prompting his companions to freeze. It means something has changed in the artificial reality around them. For many viewers, the idea resonated deeply. Long before the film, people across the world had reported the eerie sensation of living a moment twice. The movie simply gave the feeling a new name, a glitch in reality itself. Déjà vu, from the French for already seen, describes the sudden, fleeting conviction that the present moment has happened before. It is as if the mind replays a memory that does not exist, making time loop for a few seconds. The experience is strangely emotional, familiar yet impossible, comforting yet deeply unsettling. It can strike anywhere: walking into a new building, hearing a conversation, or watching light fall through a window. For a brief instant, the ordinary world feels like a recording that has skipped backward. Scientific study of déjà vu began in the late 19th century, when neurologists and psychologists tried to catalog the conditions under which it appeared. Early theories linked it to spiritual memory or reincarnation, suggesting that the sensation came from echoes of past lives. Later, with the development of neuroscience, researchers began to explore it as a cognitive event, a product of the brain rather than the soul. Yet even after decades of study, the exact mechanism remains unclear. Modern research suggests that déjà vu arises from a temporary miscommunication between memory and perception. The hippocampus and temporal lobes, regions responsible for recognizing familiarity, may activate before the brain retrieves the actual memory that would justify that feeling. In other words, the signal that says, "I've seen this before," arrives too early, creating a false sense of repetition. For a moment, the world feels like it is being rewatched, even though the scene is entirely new. The phenomenon can also be triggered by stress, fatigue, or sensory overload. It is more common in younger adults and tends to decrease with age, possibly as the brain's pattern recognition systems become less reactive. In rare cases, frequent déjà vu can accompany temporal lobe epilepsy, where neural misfires create waves of false familiarity. Yet for most people, it is an isolated and harmless event, a glitch in the smooth operation of memory. Despite the neurological explanations, the emotional impact of déjà vu can be profound. Many describe it as a momentary collapse of time, a shimmer between what is real and what is remembered. The world seems both solid and uncertain, as if the laws of continuity had briefly loosened. In everyday life, déjà vu may last only a few seconds, but its impression can linger much longer. A quiet reminder that perception is not absolute. The connection to the Matrix amplified this sense of mystery. The film's depiction of déjà vu as evidence of a hidden system, a computer simulation adjusting itself, provided a cultural framework that many adopted instinctively. It became shorthand for any moment that feels unreal or too precise, any flicker of recognition that seems to transcend logic. In the years after the film's release, reports of déjà vu multiplied in online communities. People began describing it not just as a psychological event, but as a possible sign of interference in the structure of reality itself. From a philosophical point of view, déjà vu touches the same nerve as the Mandela Effect, the fear that reality may not be entirely stable. If the mind can generate false familiarity, what guarantees that true familiarity is real? The boundaries between perception, memory, and imagination blur, leaving only experience itself, fragile, subjective, and endlessly reconstructing. It is not surprising that so many find in déjà vu a hint of something beyond science, a small tear in the veil of certainty. However, researchers emphasize that the illusion's power comes precisely from how convincingly the brain simulates recognition. The neural patterns that create familiarity are among the oldest and most efficient in the human brain. They evolved to help our ancestors recognize faces, places, and dangers. When these circuits activate without the supporting data, the mind cannot easily dismiss the signal. It feels true because the same biological machinery confirms it as such. Déjà vu, then, is less an error in perception and more a misfire in one of the brain's most trusted systems. Yet, even with this understanding, the experience continues to feel metaphysical. The soft pulse of déjà vu has a cinematic quality, as if time folds over itself. For an instant, the world is both rehearsal and performance. Every detail, the sound of footsteps, the tilt of the light, the faint scent of air, seems pre-recorded. The person experiencing it stands between two identical moments, unable to tell which one is the original. In rare cases, people report déjà rêve, the sensation of living a moment that they had previously dreamed. Here, the border between dream and waking life becomes indistinct, reinforcing the idea that consciousness is not a continuous stream but a series of fragments stitched together. Some researchers speculate that these moments reveal how memory integrates new experiences into existing patterns, creating brief overlaps where past and present coexist. Whether viewed as a neurological glitch or a poetic symbol of reality's fragility, déjà vu continues to intrigue both scientists and philosophers. It reminds us that our experience of time is not absolute but constructed. Each second of awareness is assembled from sensory data and memory, fused together in the brain's effort to maintain coherence. When that construction falters, the illusion of smooth continuity cracks, and through that small fracture, the mind glimpses its own machinery. For most, the moment passes as quickly as it comes. The room returns to normal, the conversation resumes, and the strange echo of familiarity fades into silence. But something remains, the quiet thought that perhaps time is not a straight line after all, but a looping thread that occasionally crosses itself. And in that fleeting loop, between memory and perception, lies one of the most intimate and enduring mysteries of human consciousness: the sensation of déjà vu. The glitch in the sky. Throughout history, the sky has been a screen for human imagination, a boundless space where myth, science, and wonder converge. Yet in recent decades, a strange category of eyewitness reports has emerged from different parts of the world. Visions of cities floating in the air, entire skylines with towers, lights, and streets, appearing for minutes at a time before dissolving into the clouds. These events, collectively referred to as the glitch in the sky, continue to puzzle both observers and scientists who attempt to explain what might cause such illusions. One of the most well-known incidents occurred in October 2015 over the city of Foshan in southern China. Hundreds of residents looked up to see what appeared to be a vast, ghostly city suspended above them. Videos captured by mobile phones showed skyscraper-like shapes, hazy yet structured, stretching across the horizon. Within days, similar footage surfaced from Jiangxi province. a nearly identical vision appearing over another city hundreds of kilometers away. The scene spread quickly across social media, accompanied by speculation ranging from atmospheric mirages to interdimensional bleed-throughs. Scientists were quick to suggest that these were examples of a phenomenon known as fata morgana, a complex form of mirage caused by layers of air at different temperatures bending light unevenly. When warm air lies over cooler air, distant objects can be refracted and appear higher than they are, distorted and enlarged. Ships at sea have long been seen floating above the water due to this effect. It is plausible, they argue, that under rare atmospheric conditions, buildings far beyond the horizon could be projected into the sky as spectral reflections. Yet, for those who witnessed the Foshan event, the explanation felt inadequate. The vision was too detailed, too symmetrical, and unlike any nearby city. People described not just structures but depth, streets, and movement, as if an entire urban landscape had briefly phased into view. The incident became a subject of fascination, not only in China but across the world, echoing earlier reports from Africa, the United States, and even medieval Europe. In the late 19th century, a nearly identical account came from Dalali, a small village in Nigeria. After a thunderstorm, residents claimed to see a city in the sky, with tall buildings, glowing windows, and faint sounds like machinery. Witnesses insisted it was not a mirage but something tangible, as though a hidden world had momentarily overlapped with their own. Folklore scholars noted similar descriptions in European records from centuries before, tales of heavenly castles and phantom cities drifting in the air after storms. Whether rooted in optics or imagination, such stories share a striking consistency, a sense that reality had glitched, revealing a layer not meant to be seen. From a scientific perspective, the glitch in the sky can be understood through the fragile interface between light, air, and human perception. The atmosphere acts as a lens, bending and scattering photons in ways that sometimes trick the brain into constructing coherent images from incomplete information. When the conditions are right, with temperature inversions, humidity, and certain angles of sunlight, the result can be astonishingly realistic. The mind, programmed to recognize patterns, fills in the rest. What begins as refracted light becomes, in perception, a city in the clouds. However, even this rational framework leaves space for mystery. The precision and scale of some sightings challenge the known limits of optical mirages. In many cases, there are no cities positioned in the direction of the projection. Some recordings show movements or light changes inconsistent with environmental reflections. These details invite deeper questions about how perception and physics intertwine, and how easily the human mind can transform anomalies into meaning. Philosophers of science point out that what makes the glitch in the sky so compelling is not only its visual strangeness but its symbolic power. The sky has always represented the boundary between the known and the infinite. When it suddenly displays a mirror image of the human world, towers and streets among the clouds, it evokes a profound sense of dislocation. The familiar becomes impossible, and the impossible becomes visible. For a few minutes, the laws of nature seem to hesitate. Psychologists studying eyewitness accounts note another dimension: collective reinforcement. When several people perceive an ambiguous event simultaneously, social cues shape what each individual sees. Shared belief can synchronize perception, leading to collective visual agreement even when the stimulus is vague. This mechanism might explain why so many witnesses describe similar details during atmospheric anomalies. In this sense, the glitch in the sky reflects not only the physics of light but the psychology of belief. Still, such explanations rarely erase the unease that these events provoke. Videos of floating cities, even when labeled as optical illusions, continue to circulate widely because they touch something primal: the fear that the world might not be entirely solid. The calm surface of reality, like a digital screen, can flicker. For those who saw the sky open to reveal another landscape, the experience lingers long after the images fade. Some describe it as witnessing a glitch, others as seeing through a curtain. Both convey the same sense of rupture, a moment when the ordinary world seemed to render incorrectly. To modern viewers, raised in an age of simulations and digital imagery, such phenomena carry an additional layer of resonance. The sky's projection resembles a broken frame in a visual program, a scene repeating or misaligned. It feels like evidence, however fleeting, that our perception of reality may be mediated by something larger, an invisible architecture that sometimes misfires. Scientists continue to study these occurrences through atmospheric data and optical modeling, yet the cultural fascination persists precisely because it defies neat explanation. When the visions vanish, what remains is a subtle awareness of fragility. The clouds close, the city dissolves, and the air returns to silence. But for those who stood beneath the illusion, the memory endures as a quiet contradiction. They saw something that should not exist, and yet it did. In that fleeting overlap between light and mind, between the sky and its reflection, lies the essence of the glitch in the sky. A reminder that even the heavens, vast and immutable, can sometimes waver like an image on a trembling screen. The phantom car. Late at night, along empty highways and country roads, countless drivers have reported a vision that defies explanation. A car that appears from nowhere, moves with impossible precision, and vanishes just as suddenly. It leaves no trace of tires, sound, or collision. These are the accounts collectively known as the phantom car phenomenon, a persistent mystery that has blurred the boundary between mechanical reality and the unknown for more than a century. One of the most cited modern cases occurred in the early 2000s in Garden City, Georgia. A police dashcam captured footage of a high-speed pursuit that seemed to end with the suspect's vehicle performing the impossible. The car, a white sedan, sped away from two patrol units, swerving sharply before passing directly through a chain-link fence. The fence remained intact. When the officers stopped to inspect, the car had vanished. The footage, widely circulated on television and online, became a touchstone for believers in reality glitches, a tangible moment when physical law appeared to falter. The event was officially dismissed as a visual illusion caused by camera angle and lighting, possibly combined with a hidden driveway or break in the fence. Yet even under analysis, the motion seemed inconsistent with ordinary perspective. Viewers described a ghost-like quality to the vehicle, as if it had momentarily phased through matter. For many, this single video confirmed that not all mechanical mysteries can be explained by optics alone. Reports of phantom vehicles, however, predate modern technology by decades. In the mid-20th century, long before dashboard cameras, rural police across the United States began describing encounters with cars that seemed to defy pursuit. Officers in Nevada, Oklahoma, and Utah recounted chases where the suspect's headlights vanished into thin air, leaving no tracks on the dusty roads. Some witnesses spoke of cars that accelerated beyond possible speeds, or headlights that moved with erratic, non-human precision. When the stories spread through newspapers, they became part of a growing folklore of ghost cars, machines that appeared to belong to another time or another reality. In Britain, similar stories took root after the Second World War. Drivers on isolated roads near Surrey and Norfolk reported vintage cars gliding silently past, glowing faintly in the dark. Attempts to follow them always failed. In some cases, the vehicles appeared transparent, their interiors empty. Others described seeing a driver's shape inside, only for it to fade as the car turned a corner and disappeared. Local police dismissed these as tricks of fog and imagination, yet the consistency of detail made the reports difficult to ignore. The pattern was clear. The phantom car always arrived suddenly, moved in defiance of physics, and left no evidence behind. Psychologists studying eyewitness phenomena offer grounded explanations. The human brain, under stress or fatigue, can misinterpret brief flashes of light, reflections, or even its own expectations. The night road is an ideal environment for illusions. Darkness amplifies contrast, headlights distort depth perception, and fatigue slows reaction time. A distant reflection or another car turning away can easily appear as an object vanishing. The mind, seeking coherence, fills in the missing logic. In this view, the phantom car is not a supernatural entity but a projection, a joint creation of environment and perception. Yet these explanations do not always fit the calm, detailed testimonies of those who experienced the phenomenon. Many describe the events not in moments of panic but in quiet clarity, an awareness that something deeply wrong had entered the ordinary. There are accounts from groups of witnesses, sometimes entire patrol units, who observed the same disappearance simultaneously. The shared perception adds a layer of complexity, suggesting that some occurrences may involve environmental factors beyond individual misjudgment. From a scientific perspective, several natural mechanisms could produce convincing illusions. Refraction of light through layers of warm and cool air can bend headlights around corners, or make them seem to hover. Low fog combined with specific angles of reflection can cause duplicate images to appear and fade. Some researchers have also considered electromagnetic interference in older recording equipment, creating visual anomalies in analog footage. Each of these could, in theory, explain individual reports, though none accounts for all of them. The persistence of the phantom car in public consciousness speaks to something deeper than optics or error. It represents the collision between technology and mystery, a symbol of modern folklore emerging from the mechanical age. In earlier centuries, people saw ghost ships and spectral carriages. Today, the engine has replaced the horse, but the narrative remains. A vehicle from another plane moving through our world for reasons unknown. The myth adapts to the tools of its time. Cultural historians note that the rise of the automobile coincided with a new kind of isolation. Highways became liminal spaces, stretches of asphalt suspended between destinations, where people travel alone through darkness. Within this solitude, the line between perception and imagination becomes thin. When something strange happens on that edge, a flash, a reflection, a shadow that behaves incorrectly, the mind interprets it through the language of its era. The phantom becomes a car, sleek and fast, a mechanical specter of the modern world. Even those who dismiss the supernatural aspect of the phantom car acknowledge its psychological power. To witness a machine act outside the laws of matter challenges the deepest assumptions of control and predictability. Cars are symbols of mastery over motion. They represent human command of speed and space. When that control fails, when a vehicle passes through solid objects or disappears entirely, it undermines the notion that the physical world obeys fixed rules. It is a mechanical version of the same existential crack that déjà vu or the Mandela Effect reveals. In the end, whether the phantom car is a trick of light, a shared hallucination, or something science has yet to describe, it continues to haunt the edges of our collective imagination. The highway, with its endless horizon and rhythmic motion, remains one of the few places where modern humans are truly alone with the unknown. Somewhere in the distance, a pair of headlights may still appear, gliding silently across the night, a brief, impossible shimmer in the fabric of the rail. And when they vanish, the road will return to darkness, leaving behind only the hum of the engine and the quiet thought that not every journey takes place entirely within this world. The time slip phenomenon. Among the many accounts of reality glitches, few are as haunting as those involving the time slip phenomenon, moments when individuals claim to step, briefly and without warning, into another era. These stories share a peculiar consistency. The experience unfolds in perfect clarity, as if the world itself has changed costume. Streets become older, buildings shift in style, and people wear the clothing of another century. Then, as suddenly as it began, the illusion dissolves, leaving the witness standing once more in the present, confused, disoriented, and unable to explain what has occurred. One of the most famous modern reports took place in 1901 at the Palace of Versailles in France. Two English schoolteachers, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, were visiting the gardens when they noticed that the atmosphere seemed strangely heavy, almost silent. The people around them looked unfamiliar, dressed in 18th century fashion. They wandered through the grounds, convinced they had lost their way, until they saw a woman sketching near a temple. Later identified, they believed, as Marie Antoinette herself. When they returned a few minutes later, everything appeared normal. Their detailed account, published as an adventure, became one of the earliest and most studied cases of an alleged time slip. Decades later, a similar event was reported in Liverpool, England. In 1996, a man named Frank was walking along Bold Street when he suddenly found himself surrounded by 1950s-era cars and shopfronts. The air smelled of coal smoke, and people were dressed in mid-century clothing. He noticed a store called Crips, a name that had vanished from the street decades before. Moments later, the world seemed to flicker, and he was back in the modern city, standing outside the same location but facing contemporary buildings. Local historians confirmed that crypts had indeed operated there in the 1950s. Frank's story, widely circulated, became a cornerstone of British paranormal lore. Such cases are not limited to a single culture or region. Reports of temporal dislocation appear from the United States, Japan, South America, and across Europe. Witnesses often describe a sudden drop in temperature, a shift in light, and an overwhelming stillness, as though sound itself had been muted. The world around them feels both real and unreal, solid yet hollow. These episodes last from seconds to minutes, and afterward, the memory remains vivid, sharper than ordinary recollection. Science approaches the time-slip phenomenon through the lenses of perception, neurology, and memory. One possible explanation involves temporal lobe anomalies, brief disruptions in the brain's processing of time and context. The temporal lobe is responsible for integrating sensory information into a coherent sense of now. When it misfires, as in cases of temporal lobe epilepsy or certain types of migraines, individuals can experience profound distortions in time perception. The brain may overlay fragments of memory or imagination onto current sensory input, creating an immersive hallucination indistinguishable from reality. Psychological states can amplify these effects. Fatigue, emotional stress, or hypnosis can alter how the mind synchronizes temporal information. Under such conditions, the brain might temporarily fail to anchor perception to the present, blending stored imagery with the physical world. This could explain why many time-slip experiences occur in historically charged locations. Old buildings, ancient streets, or battlefields where the past is richly imprinted in cultural memory. The setting itself may act as a catalyst for the imagination, allowing subconscious knowledge to manifest as sensory experience. However, what distinguishes these events from simple hallucination is their coherence. Witnesses often report precise architectural or social details later verified as historically accurate, even when they had no prior knowledge of them. In the Versailles case, for example, the teachers described pathways and structures that had existed only in 18th century maps. Such accuracy fuels speculation that these experiences involve more than the mind alone, that time itself might possess layers, occasionally overlapping like transparent films. In theoretical physics, time is not always linear. Relativity and quantum mechanics describe it as a dimension intertwined with space, flexible under extreme conditions. While mainstream science does not support the idea of spontaneous human time travel, some researchers acknowledge that our perception of time is an active construct, not an absolute flow. The brain stitches together sensory data into a continuous narrative, and any disruption in that stitching could produce the illusion of slipping through time. The mystery lies in why such illusions can appear so vivid, and occasionally so historically precise. Cultural interpretations of time slips often reflect the anxieties of their era. In the early 20th century, they were seen as echoes of a spiritual world, evidence of the soul crossing temporal boundaries. In more recent decades, with the rise of digital metaphors, they are sometimes framed as glitches in a simulated reality, brief moments when the program replays an older version of the world. Regardless of interpretation, the emotional effect remains the same. A deep, almost sacred sense of dislocation, as if one has briefly stepped outside the ordinary flow of existence. What unites all accounts of time slips is their stillness. Witnesses rarely describe movement or chaos. Instead, time seems to pause, the air heavy, the sound muted, the light altered. It is as though the universe holds its breath. Then, with a subtle flicker, reality resumes, and the moment is gone. Those who experience it often struggle to find words. They speak of walking through history or feeling the world reset. Yet language cannot fully capture the sensation of standing between two centuries. For science, the time-slip phenomenon remains a riddle at the edge of psychology and physics. For those who have lived it, it is something more personal, a confrontation with the possibility that time may not be a straight line but a field, one that occasionally folds upon itself. When the moment ends, the world returns unchanged. The streetlights hum, traffic moves, and the air feels ordinary again. But within the witness, something has shifted. They have glimpsed a parallel layer of existence, one where past and present momentarily touch, leaving behind only a memory of impossible silence and the haunting impression that time, for a few heartbeats, forgot its own direction. The missing plane of Flight 19. On the afternoon of December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on what should have been a routine training mission. The flight, designated Flight 19, consisted of 14 experienced airmen, led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a combat veteran of the Pacific War. Their task was simple: follow a triangular route over the Atlantic, practice bombing runs, and return to base before dusk. The weather was fair, the aircraft fully fueled, and all systems in order. Yet within hours, all 5 planes, and later, a rescue aircraft sent after them, vanished without a trace. The mystery of Flight 19 became one of the most enduring puzzles in aviation history, and one of the earliest modern legends associated with what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. Radio transcripts from that afternoon capture the growing confusion among the pilots. About 90 minutes into the mission, Taylor's voice came through, distorted but urgent. "Both of my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down." In reality, Taylor was not over the Florida Keys but likely somewhere east, over open ocean. Believing he was flying south over the Gulf of Mexico, he turned northeast, leading his formation farther out to sea. As daylight faded, fuel ran low. The last message heard from Flight 19 was chillingly calm. "We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." Then silence. Within minutes, the Navy dispatched a PBM Mariner rescue plane with 13 crew members to search for the missing squadron. Less than 30 minutes after takeoff, that aircraft also disappeared. Witnesses on a nearby tanker reported seeing a flash of light in the sky, followed by a plume of smoke, but no wreckage was ever found. In total, 27 men vanished that evening. Despite one of the largest sea air searches in U.S. history, covering more than 300,000 square kilometers, not a single body, aircraft fragment, or oil slick was ever recovered. The official Navy report offered no definitive explanation. Early drafts blamed Taylor's navigational error compounded by compass failure, but this conclusion was later softened to cause unknown. The phrase became a seed for decades of speculation. Newspapers called it the flight that flew into oblivion. Theories multiplied: magnetic anomalies, sudden weather shifts, methane gas eruptions from the seafloor, even alien abduction. The disappearance of Flight 19 became the defining legend of the Bermuda Triangle, an area stretching roughly between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, a region said to swallow ships and planes without warning. Scientific analyses over the years have attempted to strip away the myth. Meteorological data shows that the weather worsened that evening. Strong winds and cloud cover could have disoriented the pilots, making celestial navigation impossible. Compasses in that region can also behave erratically due to the agonic line, the line where magnetic north and true north align, which passes near the Bahamas. Small errors in reading could compound quickly, sending a formation hundreds of miles off course. Once night fell, with low fuel and no landmarks, ditching in the open ocean would have been fatal. In heavy seas, aircraft could sink within minutes, leaving no floating debris. Still, the mystery persists because of what was not found. Modern oceanographic surveys have located numerous wrecks in the region, but none confirmed as Flight 19. The Atlantic in that area is deep, with currents that shift constantly, scattering debris far from the original crash site. For families of the crew, the absence of answers became its own haunting presence, an unending question suspended in time. The legend deepened in the post-war years, fueled by books and television. Charles Berlitz's 1974 bestseller The Bermuda Triangle framed Flight 19 as evidence of a window in spacetime, a region where physical laws falter. He cited the compasses failing simultaneously, the distortion in radio signals, and the sudden disappearance of both the squadron and their rescuers as signs of an environmental anomaly. While no scientific evidence supported this, The story resonated with a public fascinated by the unknown and disillusioned by the certainties of the modern age. Flight 19 came to symbolize the fragility of technology against the vastness of nature, and perhaps against forces still beyond comprehension. In later decades, aviation historians revisited the case with more advanced tools. Archival research revealed that Taylor had transferred to Fort Lauderdale only a few days earlier and was unfamiliar with local geography. His compasses, while functional, might have appeared faulty because he misjudged his position. Pilots following him, bound by formation discipline, trusted his judgment even as he led them off course. This interpretation aligns with known cases of loss of situational awareness, a psychological state where trained aviators, deprived of reliable external cues, gradually become trapped in a false mental map of their surroundings. Yet, even this rational account cannot erase the strange symmetry of the event. 5 planes vanish, then a 6th, all within hours, all leaving no trace. In the absence of physical proof, the story continues to hover in the public imagination, balancing uneasily between history and myth. For believers in reality glitches, Flight 19 represents more than an accident. It is a tear in the fabric of normal experience, a moment when human certainty dissolves into silence. From a scientific viewpoint, the disappearance underscores how vast and unpredictable our planet remains. The sea conceals its secrets well, a shifting, unstable archive that swallows evidence and returns only fragments. But from a human perspective, the loss of Flight 19 endures because it feels incomplete. It is not merely the story of planes that failed to return, but of time itself pausing, erasing a chapter, and resuming as if nothing had happened. In that twilight over the Atlantic, 27 men crossed an invisible threshold. Whether they were undone by weather, navigation, or something stranger, their story has become part of a modern mythology. A reminder that even in an age of precision instruments and mapped skies, the world can still swallow its own stories whole. The Doppelgänger Encounters. Throughout history, there have been countless reports of people encountering their exact double, a being identical in face, voice, and presence, yet somehow not quite human. These apparitions are known as doppelgängers, a German term meaning doublegoer. In legend, the doppelganger is considered a harbinger of misfortune, a sign that something has gone wrong in the natural order. But beyond folklore, there are striking accounts of real individuals who claim to have met their own likeness, or to have been seen in 2 places at once. One of the earliest recorded cases comes from the 18th century. In 1771, the German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was riding along a rural path when he saw a man approaching on horseback. The rider wore a gray suit trimmed with gold, unfamiliar clothing that caught Goethe's attention. Years later, he found himself traveling the same route again, this time wearing the exact outfit he had once seen on the mysterious figure. The encounter haunted him, as though he had glimpsed a version of himself that existed outside the flow of time. A century later, Émilie Sagui, a French schoolteacher working at a girls' boarding school in Latvia, became the subject of one of the most detailed doppelganger reports in history. According to testimony collected by writer Robert Dale Owen in 1860, Sagui's students repeatedly saw her double appear beside her during lessons. While the Réal Emily wrote at the blackboard, a second figure, identical in every way, mimicked her movements a few feet away. At times, the apparition appeared seated beside her at the dinner table or standing silently behind her as she taught. When students tried to touch the double, their hands passed through it as though through smoke. The sightings continued for months, witnessed by dozens, until Sagui left the school, terrified and exhausted. No scientific explanation was ever found. Reports like these persisted into the 20th century. In 1905, King Umberto I of Italy met a restaurant owner in Monza who looked exactly like him and even shared his name, birth date, and background. The next day, the king was assassinated, a coincidence that strengthened the doppelganger's reputation as an omen of death. In another account, President Abraham Lincoln described seeing his own reflection doubled in a mirror shortly after his election. One image appeared pale and ghostly beside the other. His wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, interpreted it as a sign that he would not live to complete his second term. From a psychological and neurological perspective, modern science has attempted to frame these experiences as distortions of self-perception rather than supernatural encounters. In rare cases, individuals with heutoscopy, a condition linked to temporal and parietal lobe disturbances, report seeing their own body projected into external space. These episodes often occur during exhaustion, illness, or moments of extreme stress, when the brain's ability to integrate sensory and proprioceptive information becomes unstable. The mind, unable to reconcile its internal map of the body with external reality, creates a vivid, tangible image of the self standing apart. Experiments using electrical stimulation of the brain have replicated similar sensations. Researchers at the University Hospital of Geneva discovered that stimulating certain regions of the temporoparietal junction can produce the distinct feeling of a presence behind or beside the subject, sometimes described as another self. In some trials, patients even saw full visual doubles that mirrored their movements. This suggests that the phenomenon might arise from disruptions in how the brain constructs bodily awareness, creating a momentary duplication of identity. Yet many doppelganger encounters do not fit neatly into this framework. Some are witnessed by multiple people simultaneously, describing identical details. Others occur in broad daylight, involving individuals in full health and clarity of mind. When the German writer Guy de Maupassant experienced repeated visions of his double in the 1880s, he documented them with unsettling precision. The apparition not only appeared before him but allegedly dictated one of his short stories. Maupassant later developed severe neurological illness, but his descriptions remain some of the most articulate records of the phenomenon's psychological depth, an encounter with the self as both familiar and alien. In cultural terms, the doppelganger embodies humanity's unease with identity and consciousness. To see oneself from the outside is to confront the fragility of existence, the realization that one's sense of I might be a delicate projection, easily fragmented. Literature and film have embraced this archetype for centuries, from Dostoevsky's The Double to modern science fiction, where clones and simulations echo the same ancient fear, that the self is not singular, but divisible. From a scientific angle, it remains uncertain why such experiences can appear so concrete and consistent across witnesses. Visual hallucinations rarely generate identical external observations among multiple people. Some theorists suggest that collective perception might play a role, a subtle psychological contagion where expectation and attention align to produce shared imagery. Others propose that rare atmospheric or electromagnetic conditions could influence perception, though this remains speculative. Despite centuries of documentation, no verifiable evidence of a true physical duplicate has ever been recorded. Yet the persistence of these stories across cultures and eras gives them an unusual weight. Whether understood as neurological anomalies, psychological projections, or glimpses into parallel realities, doppelganger encounters occupy a strange intersection between science and myth. They feel deeply personal, as if reality momentarily reflects something hidden within the observer. In modern times, the motif of the double continues to appear in reports of reality glitches, sightings of one's own likeness in unexpected places, or moments when two identical strangers cross paths with uncanny resemblance. On social media, these experiences are shared as eerie coincidences, yet they carry the same unsettling undertone that haunted earlier centuries. The idea that two versions of a person can exist at once defies the ordinary rules of perception and identity. For those who have lived such moments, the memory remains indelible. They describe the encounter not with fear, but with a quiet recognition, as if looking through a window into another timeline, where they continue walking after turning a different way. In science, the doppelganger remains an unanswered question about the boundaries of selfhood. In human experience, it is something more profound, a whisper from the edge of reality, suggesting that consciousness may cast more than one shadow. The disappearing hotel. Among the most haunting reports of reality glitches is the phenomenon of the disappearing hotel, stories in which travelers spend a night in a place that later seems never to have existed. These accounts share the same chilling pattern. The witness finds an inn or guest house that feels oddly out of time, stays there briefly, and upon returning later discovers no trace of it, as if the building had been erased from history. One of the most detailed and widely discussed cases occurred in 1979, when two English couples, Jeff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby, were driving through rural France on their way to Spain. After hours on the road, they decided to stop for the night near Montélimar. They left the main route and followed a narrow country road until they found a small, old-fashioned hotel beside a quiet lane. The staff wore clothing that seemed distinctly out of date, yet the travelers assumed it was simply a traditional establishment. Dinner was served with simple cutlery, no sign of modern conveniences, and the room rate was remarkably low. The next morning, they paid in old French francs, coins that had been out of circulation for years, and continued their journey. Days later, on their return trip, they attempted to find the same hotel. The road was familiar, but the building was gone. Local townspeople claimed no such inn had ever existed. When they later developed the photographs they had taken that evening, the images of the hotel were missing from the film roll. Every other photograph appeared intact. The story, which became known as the Vanishing Hotel of Montélimar, was investigated by journalists and paranormal researchers. Yet no conclusive evidence surfaced. The couples maintained their account with consistency for decades, insisting that they had not been confused or dreaming. Their testimony became one of the most cited examples of a potential time slip or dimensional anomaly. A similar account was reported by two British women traveling through Spain in the 1990s. They described stopping at a rustic, brightly lit hotel with antique furniture and courteous staff dressed in 19th-century attire. The next day, upon revisiting the area, they found an empty field where the hotel should have stood. Local officials could not identify any record of such an establishment. These patterns, a sudden shift in atmosphere, archaic surroundings, and the later absence of any trace, form the basis of what researchers call transient reality anomalies. Such events, though anecdotal, occur often enough to have drawn the attention of psychologists and physicists alike. From a scientific standpoint, the disappearing hotel phenomenon might be explained through errors of perception and memory under conditions of stress, fatigue, or travel disorientation. Long drives, time zone changes, and sensory overload can create temporary confusion in the brain's spatial mapping system. The hippocampus, responsible for forming new memories, can sometimes blend separate experiences into a single coherent, though inaccurate narrative. In this way, a traveler might misplace the location of an inn, remember it in altered form, or even merge details from multiple places into one imagined composite. However, the accounts of the Montélimar travelers resist such easy dismissal. The consistency of their testimonies, their shared sensory details, and the missing photographic evidence make the case difficult to reduce to mere confusion. Skeptics argue that the couples may have stayed at an old hostel later demolished, or that translation errors in local inquiries created the impression that the building never existed. Yet, to those who experienced it, the strangeness was absolute, a quiet rupture in the continuity of the world. In physics, certain fringe theories suggest that reality may not be a smooth, linear construct but a layered or probabilistic field. If so, consciousness might occasionally perceive alternate timelines, fleeting intersections where different versions of the world coexist. While no empirical data supports such claims, the notion echoes throughout accounts of disappearing places. The hotel, in this interpretation, would not vanish but simply revert to another branch of reality once the observer leaves. From a psychological angle, these experiences might also relate to dissociative episodes, moments when perception detaches from normal reality under stress or exhaustion. During such episodes, the brain may construct hyper-realistic environments from memory fragments, sensory distortion, or dream imagery. What makes the disappearing hotel phenomenon so compelling is that it feels tangible to those involved, involving multiple witnesses who later report matching details. Shared hallucinations are exceedingly rare, making these stories difficult to categorize. Throughout history, similar tales appear in travel journals and folklore. In Ireland and Scotland, there are legends of travelers finding fairy inns, places where food and drink are offered, and when morning comes, both the host and the house have dissolved into mist. In Japanese folklore, stories of yokai inns or spirit houses echo the same theme. Such parallels suggest that the disappearing hotel is an ancient motif, reappearing in modern form through the lens of contemporary travel. Even in the age of GPS and digital maps, new reports surface occasionally. Travelers claim to find motels or roadside diners that vanish from navigation systems the next day. Some involve missing timestamps on digital photographs or corrupted GPS tracks. Whether these anomalies stem from technical errors or something deeper remains uncertain. What they reveal, however, is a lingering sense that our reality, so carefully measured and mapped, still holds regions of uncertainty. For those who experience it, the memory of the disappearing hotel is not frightening so much as profoundly disorienting. They describe it as a dream that felt more vivid than waking life, a place that existed for one night and then receded beyond reach. The hotel becomes a symbol of impermanence, of time folding briefly upon itself, of the fragility of the moment we call now. In the scientific view, such events remain unverified, perhaps shaped by the mind's fallible recall and the distortions of fatigue. Yet, within the quiet corridors of the human imagination, the idea persists that somewhere, along forgotten roads and fading routes, there are doors that open not only into other places but into other times. And if one happens to step through, even unknowingly, the world that follows may never feel entirely solid again. The Shadow People. Across cultures and generations, countless individuals have described seeing figures made of darkness, human in shape, but devoid of detail, substance, or identity. These apparitions, often glimpsed at the edges of vision, are known as shadow people. They appear briefly, standing still or gliding silently across a room, vanishing when looked at directly. Their outlines are distinct but featureless, as if carved from pure absence. The phenomenon has been recorded for centuries, though the modern term shadow people emerged in the late 20th century, popularized by radio programs and online forums. Yet descriptions of such entities stretch far deeper into human history. In folklore, they were called night watchers, shade men, or the people who walk between. Despite variations in language and culture, the core experience remains strikingly consistent: a fleeting encounter with a conscious, shadow-like presence. Reports often occur at night in half-waking states or during periods of emotional stress. Witnesses describe lying in bed, unable to move, while a dark figure stands near the doorway or at the foot of the bed. Sometimes it seems to lean closer, radiating a sense of awareness. Others encounter them while fully awake, in hallways, at work, or driving late at night. Brief silhouettes that dissolve instantly. What unites these accounts is the sense of an observer. Not a ghost or a hallucination, but something that feels autonomous, intelligent, and aware. From a neurological perspective, many shadow person encounters align with episodes of sleep paralysis, a state in which the body remains immobilized during the transition between sleep and wakefulness, while the mind becomes partially conscious. During such moments, the brain can project vivid visual hallucinations into the darkened environment. The sense of a presence, often menacing or watchful, is a well-documented feature of this condition. In scientific terms, it arises from a misfiring of the amygdala and parietal regions, the brain's centers for fear and spatial awareness, creating a powerful illusion of another being nearby. However, not all reports fit this pattern. Many witnesses claim to have seen shadow figures while fully awake, sometimes in broad daylight. Security guards, night shift workers, and even hospital staff have described fleeting silhouettes that cross corridors or stand motionless against walls, only to disappear when approached. In these accounts, the figures lack substance yet cast no clear shadow of their own. Electronic sensors or cameras rarely record anything unusual, leaving the experience confined to human perception alone. Psychologists interpret these waking encounters as manifestations of pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find meaningful patterns in ambiguous stimuli. In low light or under stress, the visual system may exaggerate shapes, turning shadows and motion into human forms. Fatigue, anxiety, or environmental factors like flickering lights can heighten this effect. The experience feels real because the brain's emotional centers activate as though responding to genuine danger. Yet for those who experience it, the sense of reality is absolute. The air feels charged, the atmosphere shifts, and the moment carries a weight that simple optical illusions fail to explain. In some accounts, multiple witnesses describe seeing the same shadow figure simultaneously. This shared perception remains one of the phenomenon's most puzzling features, challenging the boundaries between psychological and external reality. Culturally, the image of the shadow person resonates with deep human archetypes: the fear of being watched, the presence of the unknown within familiar spaces, the confrontation with one's own unconscious. In Jungian psychology, such figures are viewed as projections of the shadow self, the repressed aspects of identity that emerge symbolically through dreams and visions. In this interpretation, the encounter is not external at all, but an internal mirror momentarily projected into the physical world. From a parapsychological angle, shadow entities are sometimes linked to theories of interdimensional overlap, the idea that under certain conditions, consciousness may perceive beings from parallel realities existing alongside our own. Proponents argue that their lack of light or color suggests not darkness, but rather the absence of physical resonance with our reality. While such ideas remain speculative and unsupported by empirical evidence, they illustrate the human effort to make sense of experiences that defy ordinary explanation. Modern technology has not diminished these reports. On online forums and video platforms, individuals share accounts of figures appearing on security cameras, reflected in mirrors, or standing just outside fields of light. Although many such videos are easily explained by compression artifacts or motion blur, others remain ambiguous enough to sustain belief. The digital age has merely extended the landscape in which ancient fears take new form. What distinguishes the shadow people phenomenon from other apparitions is its emotional intensity. Witnesses rarely describe awe or wonder. Instead, they speak of a deep, instinctive unease. The presence feels neither ghostly nor demonic, but something older, colder, and utterly impersonal. Some describe a sense of being studied. Others feel that the entity is connected somehow to their own thoughts, responding subtly to emotion. The silence of these encounters is often what lingers most. A silence that feels weighted, aware. Scientific inquiry acknowledges the power of perception but leaves the core mystery unresolved. The human brain, with its capacity to simulate and project, can create experiences indistinguishable from reality. Yet the recurring, consistent nature of shadow person encounters across cultures and centuries suggests a deeper pattern, one that touches both neurology and mythology. Perhaps the truth lies between worlds, in the intersection of biology and belief, of perception and meaning. The shadow stands as a metaphor for that threshold, the thin line between what is seen and what is sensed. For those who have encountered these figures, the experience marks a quiet fracture in their understanding of reality. The room returns to normal, the air clears, and logic resumes its grip. But in the silence that follows, a question lingers unspoken, not of fear, but of uncertainty. They have glimpsed something that should not be there, something that retreats when looked at directly, as if existing only in the corner of perception where the world is not entirely solid. The Green Children of Woolpit. In the quiet countryside of medieval England, sometime in the 12th century, the villagers of Woolpit made an extraordinary discovery. Two small children, a boy and a girl, were found standing near one of the village's wolf pits, disoriented, frightened, and entirely unlike anyone the locals had ever seen. Their skin, witnesses said, was green, clothed in strange fabric of unfamiliar texture. The children spoke no recognizable language. They refused all food offered to them except for raw beans, which they seemed to eat ravenously. The villagers, confused yet compassionate, took them in. Over time, the children's skin slowly lost its greenish tint, and they began to adapt to their surroundings. But the mystery of who they were, and where they had come from, would haunt historians for centuries. The first written accounts of this event appear in the chronicles of two respected 12th century historians, Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh. Both men, known for their detailed and often sober record-keeping, described the incident as a genuine mystery rather than a folktale. Their reports, though differing in minor details, agree on the core facts. Two green-skinned children appeared from nowhere, spoke an unknown tongue, and told a story that defied explanation. According to the surviving girl, the boy, sadly, died soon after their discovery. She and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land, a world of perpetual twilight where everything was green. She claimed that one day, while tending their father's cattle, they followed the sound of bells and suddenly found themselves in Woolpit, blinded by sunlight and surrounded by strange people. The story feels almost allegorical, as though a fragment of myth had drifted into the historical record. Yet the details are presented with the plain precision typical of monastic chroniclers, suggesting that, at least to them, this was not legend but testimony. Modern scholars have offered numerous theories. One of the most common is chlorosis, a form of iron deficiency anemia once known as green sickness, which can give the skin a pale greenish hue. Combined with malnutrition and disorientation, the children may have been orphans, possibly Flemish immigrants displaced by warfare, who spoke a dialect no one in Woolpit recognized. The greenish skin could have been the result of starvation, later fading as they recovered their health. Another possibility involves folk memory and symbolic storytelling. In this view, the green children represent outsiders, strangers who entered an isolated community and were slowly absorbed into it. The green color, often associated in medieval thought with nature, mystery, and otherworldliness, may have served as a metaphor for cultural difference. Yet others see in the story a deeper enigma. The description of a world without sunlight, where everything was green, has led some to speculate about parallel dimensions or underground civilizations, themes echoed in later folklore about the fair folk or subterranean beings living just beyond the human world. The idea that the children crossed a boundary, slipping unintentionally between realms, fits intriguingly with later accounts of time slips and dimensional anomalies. The girl's eventual adaptation to human society adds another layer to the mystery. Chroniclers note that after learning English, she worked as a servant and lived an ordinary life. When asked again about her origins, she maintained her story about St. Martin's Land until the end. Her steadfastness suggests either a deeply rooted fantasy or a memory she herself could not explain. In some interpretations, the tale symbolizes the collision between two realities, one known, one forgotten. Medieval England was a place of deep superstition, where the boundaries between natural and supernatural were porous. The story of the Green Children may have represented that intersection, a glimpse into the hidden world people believed existed alongside their own. Interestingly, linguistic analysis of the name Woolpit, derived from Wolf-Pytt, or Wolf Pit, adds an eerie symbolic note. Wolves, in medieval lore, were creatures of both danger and transformation. Finding children, symbols of innocence, at such a place creates a stark image of the unknown emerging from darkness into the light of human settlement. From a modern anthropological perspective, the tale endures not because it offers answers, but because it captures something timeless, the encounter with the inexplicable. Whether the children were real people misinterpreted through fear and wonder, or a myth that crystallized from oral tradition, their story embodies the tension between the rational and the fantastic, between the safety of what we know and the vastness of what we do not. In the centuries since, the legend of the Green Children of Woolpit has been retold in poetry, art, and speculative fiction. Each retelling shifts the balance. Some treat it as a parable about immigration, others as evidence of lost dimensions or alien contact. But all share the same haunting image. Two small figures standing bewildered in the English sunlight, their skin touched by the color of another world. And so, like many so-called reality glitches, the story remains suspended between history and myth, a riddle that neither time nor science has fully dispelled. The villagers of Woolpit saw something that should not have been there. Whether they witnessed a strange accident of nature or a fleeting intersection between worlds, their account endures as a quiet challenge to our sense of what is possible. The elevator game. Among the strange rituals said to blur the line between reality and illusion, few are as eerily methodical as the elevator game. Originating from South Korea's urban folklore, this so-called game describes a precise sequence of actions that, according to legend, allows a person to travel to another dimension, a shadow version of our own world. The instructions are detailed and unnerving in their simplicity. A person must find a building with at least 10 floors and enter its elevator alone. Then, pressing the buttons in a specific order, 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5, and finally 1. They must resist stepping out no matter what they hear or see. At the end of this sequence, the elevator supposedly takes them not back to the lobby, but to a place that looks identical to the real world, yet feels disturbingly wrong. In this other world, the lights are dim, the air heavy, and no one else exists. There may be a faint red glow outside the windows, or a deep hum that vibrates through the air. Everything appears frozen, a mirror image of reality where time seems to have stopped. Those who claim to have experienced it describe an overwhelming sense of isolation, as if they've slipped out of existence entirely. The elevator game entered Western awareness in the early 2010s, largely through online forums and creepypasta websites. But its origins trace further back, connected to Korean ghost lore and the concept of Han, a cultural idea of unresolved emotion or spiritual tension. In older versions, elevators are seen not merely as machines but as thresholds, spaces that momentarily detach from the world, rising and falling between points that defy the normal flow of space. For centuries, storytellers have viewed elevators and staircases as liminal places, transitions between one state and another. The elevator game transforms this everyday motion into a ritual of dislocation. The very structure of the game, its numbered floors, repetitive motions, and strict silence, mirrors the structure of an incantation. To some folklorists, this is precisely what gives it power. Rituals, after all, often rely on sequence and belief more than physical mechanics. However, the myth took a darker turn when people began linking it to real events. One of the most cited connections appeared in discussions surrounding the 2013 case of Elisa Lam, a Canadian student whose death at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles became an internet mystery. Security footage showed her acting erratically inside an elevator, pressing multiple buttons, and stepping in and out as if she were hiding or speaking to someone unseen. Although the investigation ultimately concluded her death was accidental, the elevator footage became a cultural lightning rod. Many online viewers searching for meaning drew parallels to the elevator game sequence, turning folklore into urban speculation. Psychologists studying the phenomenon have noted that such games serve a social and emotional function. In a modern world saturated with technology and rational explanation, these rituals reintroduce uncertainty, a sense that the universe still hides secrets. The tension of isolation, the repetition of movement, and the soft hum of mechanical motion all combine to heighten sensory awareness, pushing the participant toward mild dissociation. In that altered state, even ordinary sensations, a flicker of light, a mechanical noise, can feel otherworldly. From a scientific standpoint, there is nothing supernatural in these experiences. Elevators are enclosed spaces where sensory deprivation and anxiety can distort perception. The game's structure itself encourages expectation and self-suggestion. When the player anticipates a glitch in reality, the brain becomes hypervigilant, interpreting shadows or sounds as signs of another realm. Yet the story persists. Despite countless analyses and skeptical debunkings, the elevator game continues to circulate in online communities around the world. Each retelling carries subtle variations, different button orders, new warnings, or altered outcomes. Some say that if one meets a woman who enters on the 5th floor, she must not be spoken to or even looked at. Others claim that once in the other world, the elevator may malfunction, trapping the traveler indefinitely. This evolving folklore illustrates how myth adapts to modern architecture. In earlier centuries, thresholds between worlds were found in caves, forests, or mist-covered bridges. Today, they are hidden inside office buildings and hotels, spaces where anonymous movement and silent machinery dominate human experience. The elevator game turns that everyday technology into a psychological symbol of disconnection. Ultimately, what makes this legend compelling is not whether it can be proven, but how it reflects the modern condition. It speaks to the fear of being alone in an indifferent system, of moving through identical floors, pressing buttons in search of meaning, and perhaps finding only emptiness reflected back. Like many so-called reality glitches, the elevator game blurs the boundary between superstition and mental suggestion. It reminds us that even in a world of logic and machines, mystery still finds a way to inhabit the ordinary. The elevator door closes, the hum begins, and for a brief moment, one might wonder what waits on the other side when it opens again. The Man from Taured. In the long record of unexplained travel incidents, one of the most enduring stories is that of the Man from Taured, an account that seems to straddle the border between official history and impossible fiction. The story first appeared in the mid-20th century and has since become one of the most cited reality glitch cases, describing a traveler who arrived at a major airport carrying documents from a country that does not exist. According to most retellings, the incident took place in Tokyo, Japan, in the summer of 1954. Immigration officials at Haneda Airport were conducting their usual inspections when they encountered a European-looking man arriving on a routine business flight. He presented a passport that appeared authentic in every way, complete with stamps and visas from previous travels, but the country of origin printed on it was one the officers had never seen: Taured. When asked to point out his country on a map, the man reportedly became confused and frustrated. He insisted that Taured was a real nation, located between France and Spain. He pointed directly to the area occupied by Andorra, claiming that his homeland had existed there for centuries. The officials, perplexed, told him no such country existed. He appeared genuinely shocked, insisting that he had been to Japan many times on business, working for a firm that did not appear in any record. The man carried legitimate-looking identification: a driver's license, corporate documents, and even a checkbook tied to an international bank. Yet none of them matched any known institution. His wallet contained currency from several European countries, consistent with that of a frequent traveler, and his spoken languages matched those of a well-educated businessman. Uncertain what to do, authorities placed him in a nearby hotel under surveillance while they investigated further. His documents were sent for verification, and immigration officers maintained contact with the supposed company that employed him. According to the story, when they returned the next morning, the man had vanished. The room was empty, locked from the inside, and his personal belongings, including passport and paperwork, had disappeared along with him. No record of his departure existed. He had not left through the main exits, and security reported no disturbances during the night. For officials, the matter simply ended there. For decades, the story has circulated in newspapers, books, and later the internet, as an unresolved anomaly. A man who came from a parallel version of Earth, existing just beyond the reach of our geography. Modern researchers have tried to trace the story's origins and authenticity. The earliest known mention appears in the Directory of Possibilities, 1981, a book by Colin Wilson and John Grant that cataloged unexplained events. They cited the incident as a true report, though without a verifiable source. Later writers have linked it to similar 19th-century tales of travelers from unknown lands, suggesting that it may have evolved through oral storytelling and translation. From a skeptical perspective, the case may be an amalgamation of several misunderstandings. Some historians suggest it could have been based on an actual incident involving a man from Andorra, whose nationality was mistranslated or misinterpreted by foreign reporters. In post-war decades, confusion over borders and new passports was common, especially in Europe, where documentation systems were still recovering from disruption. Nevertheless, the Man from Taured has grown into one of the most iconic examples of a dimensional slip, a supposed moment when an individual passes from one version of reality into another. This idea gained traction in the late 20th century as science fiction and popular physics introduced concepts like parallel universes and multiverse theory into mainstream culture. To many, the man's bewilderment and the consistency of his story feel too detailed to dismiss as pure invention. The fascination lies not in whether the story is verifiable, but in how it blurs the boundary between bureaucratic normalcy and the impossible. Airports are highly controlled environments, spaces of strict order, identification, and surveillance. The idea that someone could arrive there from a world slightly different from our own, with all the right papers from a non-existent nation, strikes at the heart of our confidence in systems that define what is real. For anthropologists and folklorists, the Man from Taured represents a modern myth of displacement, a story born from the anxiety of globalization. It reflects the fear of losing one's place in the world, of discovering that the map one carries no longer matches the territory. In that sense, the The tale resonates with the collective unease of a planet that has grown smaller and yet more fragmented at the same time. Whether a misreported bureaucratic incident or a genuine reality anomaly, the mystery of the man from Taured endures because it feels plausible within its impossibility. A traveler arrives, documents in order, speaking of a nation no one knows. Then he disappears, leaving behind no proof, no explanation, only the echo of an encounter that science cannot fully account for. And so, like many other reality glitches, it remains suspended between fact and fiction. An unresolved story that invites the mind to wander between worlds, searching for the borders we cannot see. The White Room Phenomenon. Among the many reports of unexplained experiences linked to altered states of perception, one stands apart for its unsettling simplicity: the White Room Phenomenon. Unlike traditional ghost stories or time-slip encounters, this anomaly describes moments in which individuals suddenly find themselves in a featureless, white space, devoid of texture, sound, or shadow. There are no walls, no ceiling, no visible source of light. Only a uniform, endless whiteness that seems to stretch in all directions. Accounts of this phenomenon vary in detail but share the same eerie consistency. The experience often begins abruptly. A person is walking through an ordinary environment, a street, a building, a hospital corridor, when everything around them fades into white. Objects dissolve, sounds vanish, and all sense of orientation disappears. Some describe floating, others standing on an invisible surface. Time feels suspended, and there is an overwhelming sense of isolation, as though reality itself has paused. After an indeterminate period, seconds or hours by subjective perception, the scene returns to normal. The individual finds themselves back where they began, often disoriented but physically unharmed. No one around them seems to have noticed anything unusual. Reports of the White Room phenomenon have surfaced sporadically since the early 20th century. The earliest mentions appear in medical journals describing near-death experiences and sensory deprivation effects. Patients revived after cardiac arrest occasionally spoke of awakening in a room of light, not a tunnel, as in many near-death reports, but a total immersion in featureless brightness. Over time, similar descriptions appeared in psychological case studies, hypnosis research, and even in reports from long-haul truck drivers and astronauts exposed to monotony and fatigue. Some neuroscientists interpret the phenomenon as a form of dissociative episode. Under extreme stress, sleep deprivation, or neurological disturbance, the brain can temporarily lose its ability to anchor sensory input to physical space. In such a state, perception may reset to an abstract blank, a kind of visual and spatial null point. The result feels like being trapped in pure awareness, stripped of context or body. In controlled experiments involving sensory deprivation tanks and light isolation chambers, subjects occasionally report sensations closely resembling the White Room. Without stimuli, the brain's visual cortex begins generating uniform light patterns, while temporal awareness collapses. The mind, unable to process external information, may create a neutral environment, not darkness but whiteness, a void filled with its own internal signal noise. However, some cases do not fit this explanation neatly. A few individuals have reported experiencing the phenomenon in groups, describing identical sensations at the same moment. In certain instances, electronic devices in the vicinity have malfunctioned or stopped recording, leading to speculation about electromagnetic interference or unexplained spatial distortions. While such reports remain anecdotal, they contribute to the enduring mystery surrounding the experience. Psychologists have also linked the White Room to temporal dislocation, moments when consciousness and the external world fall out of sync. The uniform whiteness may represent the brain's attempt to reconstruct perception in the absence of reliable input, a transitional phase between states of awareness. Some researchers draw parallels to anesthesia awareness and post-traumatic depersonalization, where the self momentarily detaches from its environment. From a cultural perspective, the White Room phenomenon carries profound symbolic weight. In religious art and literature, white has long represented purity, transcendence, and the boundary between life and death. It is the color of erasure and renewal, of beginning and ending simultaneously. The modern reports, stripped of spiritual framing, may echo that ancient association, the human mind encountering an absolute blank, a reset point in perception where meaning itself vanishes. For those who have experienced it, the most striking detail is the silence. Many describe it not as the absence of sound, but as a tangible presence, a pressure that fills the space, amplifying the isolation. The lack of sensory contrast removes all reference points, leaving consciousness suspended in what feels like infinity. When the world returns, it does so abruptly, with colors and shapes rushing back like fragments reassembling after dissolution. While the White Room remains unexplained in scientific terms, it stands as a stark reminder of how fragile the boundary between perception and reality can be. Our experience of the world depends entirely on the brain's ability to organize input into coherent form. When that structure falters, even for a moment, the familiar can vanish, replaced by something unrecognizable yet strangely peaceful. Whether it occurs within the brain or beyond it, the phenomenon occupies a liminal space in human experience, a rare glimpse into what happens when the mechanisms that define reality temporarily fail. For some, it is a terrifying void. For others, it is a moment of perfect stillness. But in every account, it feels undeniably real. In that blank, endless white, the world as we know it ceases to exist, and for a heartbeat, consciousness drifts unanchored, caught between presence and nothingness. The Teleporting Kid. Among the scattered accounts of unexplained human disappearances and sudden relocations, one case stands out for its peculiarity and persistence, the story known as the Teleporting Kid. Unlike tales of adults vanishing into thin air, this one centers on a child, a figure of innocence, seemingly transported instantaneously from one location to another without logical cause. The earliest version of the story comes from Spain in the early 20th century, though later variations appeared in Latin America and Europe. The incident reportedly involved a young boy from the village of Villar del Arzobispo, near Valencia. According to records cited in regional newspapers, the child was playing outside his home one afternoon when he vanished in full view of his mother. Search parties combed the surrounding area, assuming he had wandered into the countryside. But hours later, the boy was discovered, confused and unharmed, more than 500 kilometers away, in the city of Seville. Local authorities, skeptical yet intrigued, questioned him. The boy claimed he had been walking near the house when he suddenly felt dizzy. The next moment, he said, he was standing near a public square he didn't recognize, surrounded by strangers speaking the same language but in a different dialect. He had no memory of traveling, no sense of time passing, and could not explain how he arrived there. The details were reported in several regional publications of the era, later cited by Spanish journalist Antonio Ribera, who compiled a number of early teleportation and disappearance cases in his research on anomalous phenomena. Although no physical evidence supported the claim, the consistency of witness accounts, particularly the mother's testimony and the boy's confusion, gave the event a strange credibility that kept it alive in public memory. Over the decades, other versions appeared under the same name, the Teleporting Kid. In one variation from Mexico in the 1950s, a boy disappeared while walking to school and was found hours later hundreds of miles away in a neighboring state. In another, from the Philippines in the 1990s, a child reportedly vanished during a blackout and reappeared minutes later in a town several kilometers away, speaking incoherently about the lights and the noise. Each version shares key characteristics: the sudden disappearance, the lack of trauma or injury, and the child's inability to recall any intermediate experience. Witnesses often report that the event occurs under conditions of electrical disturbance, thunder, flickering lights, or static interference, though this detail may reflect retrospective embellishment rather than fact. From a scientific standpoint, such accounts are implausible. Human teleportation, as defined by physics, would require the instantaneous transfer of mass and information across space, an idea that remains beyond even theoretical reach. Yet the persistence of stories like these invites analysis from a psychological and sociological perspective. Children, as subjects of such events, represent the boundary of innocence and perception. Their accounts, while unreliable in detail, often reveal patterns of sensory distortion associated with trauma, heat exhaustion, or fainting. In rare cases, Temporary loss of consciousness coupled with disorientation could create the illusion of instantaneous relocation. If the child is later found in an unexpected place, perhaps having wandered farther than adults believe possible, the narrative fills in the gaps. Over time, that explanation becomes legend. Still, some researchers studying spontaneous spatial displacement point to the curious recurrence of similar reports throughout history. In the 19th century, travelers spoke of children found far from home without explanation, sometimes in enclosed areas they could not have entered by normal means. These stories, while likely embellished, suggest an enduring human fascination with sudden dislocation, the dreamlike possibility that space itself might fold or shift, carrying someone away in an instant. The teleporting kid has also become a metaphor for lost time and fractured memory. Neurologists studying temporal lobe epilepsy and dissociative fugue states note that individuals may experience episodes of travel or wandering without recollection, effectively jumping across time and space from their own perspective. For the observer, the person vanishes. For the subject, there is only a missing interval, a blank in consciousness that reality later fills in. In popular retellings, however, the story retains its simple mystery. A child disappears and reappears far away, unchanged, uniged, and bewildered. The event, stripped of technical explanation, feels like a glitch, a brief misstep in the system of reality itself. The legend persists not because it can be proven, but because it captures a deep psychological tension. The fear of losing control over space and time, of witnessing a loved one vanish for reasons that defy understanding. In that sense, the teleporting kid embodies both wonder and dread, the human hope that reality holds secrets, and the fear that those secrets can reach into the most ordinary moments of life. As with many so-called reality glitches, the story stands at the intersection of memory, perception, and imagination. Whether born from misunderstanding, coincidence, or something science has yet to measure, it endures as one of the quiet enigmas that suggest the world around us may not be as fixed as it seems. The Pixelated Sky. Among the many strange reports that blur the boundary between perception and physical reality, few are as contemporary or as haunting as what witnesses call the pixelated sky. Unlike ancient legends or folklore, this phenomenon belongs squarely to the digital age. It describes moments when the sky itself appears to flicker, shimmer, or divide into visible squares, as if the fabric of reality has briefly shown its underlying code. Accounts first began appearing online in the late 2000s, spreading across forums, social media threads, and video sharing platforms. People described looking up on clear days to see the atmosphere behave unnaturally. Clouds freezing in place, planes hovering motionless, or the light from the sun breaking into geometric patterns, like a visual glitch in a video simulation. The effect often lasted only seconds, yet left witnesses shaken. Some claim the experience is accompanied by a brief distortion in sound, a faint hum, a pulse, or total silence. Others report that the air itself seems to thicken, as though reality is buffering. Most describe the feeling of disconnection, an awareness that something fundamental in the environment has faltered. From a scientific standpoint, there are plausible explanations. Atmospheric scientists note that grid-like visual distortions can be caused by temperature inversions, optical refraction, or the interaction of sunlight with high-altitude ice crystals. Under specific conditions, these can create the illusion of straight-edged shapes or a segmented sky. Camera sensors and phone lenses, the tools most people use to record such moments, can exaggerate these effects, breaking natural gradients into pixel-like patterns due to overexposure or sensor error. However, what makes the pixelated sky phenomenon compelling is not the imagery itself, but the collective unease it produces. Unlike a simple optical illusion, witnesses describe it as emotionally charged, a profound sense that reality has momentarily revealed its structure. For many, the experience triggers a mix of awe and dread, a feeling that the world is less organic and more mechanical than it appears. Psychologists studying mass perception anomalies point out that the digital generation interprets the world through the lens of screens. The pixel, once a unit of artificial imagery, has become part of our cultural vocabulary for describing glitches, errors, and breakdowns in continuity. When something unusual happens in nature, the human brain now reaches instinctively for technological metaphors. Thus, when the light shifts in unexpected ways, it is not seen as divine or magical, but programmatic, as if reality itself were rendered on a screen. Yet the reports persist, and not all can be dismissed as simple illusion. Pilots, hikers, and meteorologists have documented cases of the sky forming checkerboard-like optical patterns during high-altitude atmospheric layering. In extremely rare conditions, the scattering of polarized light can create perceptual grids that resemble pixels, especially when filtered through polarized sunglasses or reflective glass. These physical effects, though real, do not fully account for the eerie sensation that witnesses describe, the feeling that something deeper has malfunctioned. The idea of a pixelated reality ties closely to modern theories of simulation and digital physics, which propose that the universe might be discrete rather than continuous, made up of finite information units, like the pixels in an image or the bits in a computer. While such ideas remain speculative, they resonate with experiences like this one, where the world briefly appears quantized, artificial, and unfinished. The human mind, confronted with the limits of its own perception, interprets that breakdown as a glimpse behind the curtain. In that sense, the pixelated sky serves as a modern myth, the digital age's equivalent of ancient omens in the heavens. Where past generations saw divine messages written in the clouds, people today see evidence of a system glitch, a momentary lapse in the simulation that maintains the illusion of continuity. It is the same existential tension, translated into the language of a technological civilization. Those who have witnessed it often speak of a lasting change in perspective. The world afterward feels less solid, the sky less infinite, as if every color, every horizon might one day reveal its hidden grid. For a few seconds, reality appears imperfectly rendered, a reminder that our senses and our trust in them are fragile, that the boundary between what is seen and what is real may be thinner than we imagine. The pixelated sky may never be proven as anything more than a trick of light and perception, but its symbolism endures. It is the perfect modern reality glitch, a fusion of digital consciousness and ancient wonder, an encounter between the natural and the artificial. Whether it reflects a flaw in the atmosphere, a quirk of technology, or a deeper truth about existence, it leaves behind the same quiet question that defines all such anomalies. If the world can appear to break even for an instant, what, then, is it really made of? Ending. Our world is full of mysteries that science continues to explore. Moments when reality seems to hesitate, flicker, or shift out of place. Whether these glitches are tricks of perception or glimpses beyond our understanding, they remind us how little we truly know about the nature of existence. If you enjoyed this journey through unexplained phenomena, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which story left you wondering the most, and share this video with friends who love exploring the strange edges of reality. Until next time, stay curious, and keep watching the world with open eyes.